Hello, people, and welcome to the first episode of the Rock Show on YouTube Live, baby. We're
All
live on
right.
YouTube, and this is a special preview episode. This episode will actually be up on the podcast March 15th for all you people ready to hear some hardcore rock and roll and talking about albums. And Rocker might put his mind to it. He does a great show, and today we got a special show. And this is episode 109 of the Rock Show. And goddamn, do we have an album for you, Mike? Do the introduction of the album. What are we talking about today?
Okay, everybody. I'm Rocker Mike, and today we're talking about the making of the Rolling Stones, their Satanic Majesties Request album. Uh, this is a very somewhat controversial, somewhat overlooked, I think, though lately it's gotten a lot more recognition as it got to about 50 years that it was released. It came out December 8th, 1967, and it kind of, at the time, it sold well in the beginning and then just kind of dropped off the map. And over the years, in the beginning, it was kind of mixed reviews, but over the years, it's become more and more recognized as a classic. Some people originally kind of dismissed it as a poor derivative of Sergeant Pepper by the Beatles, but
Mike,
I
I was
think it
going to
stands
ask you
by
that.
itself.
Well, I was going to ask
Yeah,
you
I
that,
mean,
Mike. Was
there's similarities, but it was a period for the Stones that was very brief. Okay, they only did this one album that could be considered psychedelic. It was right after a period where they did an album called Between the Buttons, which was kind of almost popish more than the R&B stuff they were doing a couple of years earlier. So they had kind of evolved a little bit out of the R&B
look
into
at
this
the
brief
cover.
period of pop. Yeah, yeah. And it was done by the same guy who did the cover for Sergeant Pepper. So,
Dude,
you got
and, Mike, you know what you said? I thought this was the Rolling Stones shitting on the Beatles songs Peppers. That's a
you
look
know,
at the
I
album.
I think that there is a little bit of that. Okay, I mean, there's a little. They used to give little digs to each other. I mean, all indications show they got along very well, but they used to do little digs to each other. I remember what was the album? The Beatles Revolver album, right?
Yeah.
And they were thinking of what to call it, and Ringo said, "Let's call it After Geography." Because the Stones had the album Aftermath after
That would have
Geography.
been great.
So yeah, uh, yeah. But
Dude, I
this
gotta
is an
tell you
album.
one thing. You see our
Yeah,
Revolver show? Oh, got 6,000 views.
it's done very well. I'm very pleased with that show. Yeah. Thank you for everybody who's listened to that. Um, their Satanic Majesty's Request is something that you really got to listen to. And on YouTube, some people were very cool, and they put up some lyric videos with some psychedelic stuff, so you could read the lyrics as you're listening to it.
Very cool.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so let's just jump in and give a little insight on this because it's interesting. Like I said, the album came out December 8th, 1967, and it was recorded over February and October of that year, 1967, at Olympic
Mhm.
Studios in London, which is a place that they've recorded in many times before and after that.
Why did
Their
they like
first,
that so much? Was it easy for them to record or access? Is that just a place that they like going to record?
I think it was kind of state of the art at the time, and
Okay.
it had their everything they needed there, you know, and a lot of the best producers in the business were over there, so
And,
it
and I
worked
got
for
one
it worked for
more
them.
question. This came out on two different record labels. The UK had a different record label, and the US had. Is there a reason for that? Or that's just the way they got the distribution?
It was distributed differently. I believe in America it was on London Records.
Yeah, London record. Yes.
Okay. But it was the first album, I think. Yeah, it was the first album that was released by them um, without the British EP being British LP being different than the American LP. All right, that was something that used to happen a lot. We saw it with a lot of
Yes.
bands, the Kinks, the Stones, the Beatles. They would release things in the States, and they would be a different tracks. There might be
Yeah.
added tracks, subtracted tracks, totally different. So it was just a way to uh, market it. They probably figured you'd buy it twice, though I don't think too many people did that.
Yeah.
So the album is their answer to psychedelia, which was emerging at that time in '67. Okay, kind of '66 was the beginning of it. Revolver by the Beatles, like I just mentioned, had probably one of the first psychedelic songs ever. Tomorrow Never Knows, and they were a good 6 months ahead of time, really, before that whole thing really had hit the culture, okay, in America and Britain, in the Western culture. Um, it was really just a brief period that they would deal with this, and they would evolve again out of this period into the blues rock sound that you would hear on Let It Bleed and Beggar's Banquet and Exile on Main Street and stuff like that. Sticky Fingers. This was a very brief period, just an experimental period, and the album was actually self-produced, and I think that was the first time they had done that.
What do
Their
you mean by self-produced? That they did it themselves, no producer?
Well, right. Prior to this, the Stones had Andrew Loog Oldham, okay? And Andrew Loog Oldham was their manager and producer, okay? And he kind of controlled what was going on in the studio. This album actually was a break from Oldham, okay? He was no longer involved with them anymore. He was actually fed up with them. They had a parting of ways. Let's put it that way. If you know about the Stones, this is the period when they were dressing like fashion guys from Carnaby Street in England, in London. Okay, where they had like Richards was wearing the fur coats with the big sunglasses,
Yeah,
and
I remember
that
seeing
whole
that.
with the striped pants and that whole look. It was like before he got that rooster haircut that he would have a couple of years later. He still kind of had like a bowl haircut but he was wearing like real fashionable modern clothes at the time. A lot of furs, a lot of elaborate stuff. They all were looking like that, and it was just a brief period, and the excess was just beginning. Let's put it that way.
All right.
They were down with a lot of psychedelics, LSD, and mushrooms, and all kinds of shit. The only guy who didn't The only guy who didn't really like that was Bill Wyman. Bill
Okay.
Wyman, and I guess because he was about 10 years older than them, 9 years
Yeah.
older than them, so maybe he just felt that he was more of a drinker, smoke a joint kind of thing than getting into like acid. But when it came out critically, it received mixed reviews. Some saying, like I said, that it was a derivative of Sergeant Pepper, but I
Yeah.
don't agree with that. Look.
It's
I've
very
said this
different.
before. I like it better than Sergeant Pepper.
Yeah.
Sorry if I offend anybody. All right, I actually, I think as far as filler material and stuff, I think this. I don't know. It's just me. I just think it's a more interesting album. Not to knock Sergeant Pepper, but there's some great songs on there too. But this is an album I like to listen to from beginning to end.
Yeah, it's an easy
Whereas,
listen too.
what's that?
It's an easy listen to album too. You know that you can
It
listen
is.
to it very easy.
It is, and the songs aren't really that long.
Yeah.
Okay, whereas the Beatles were starting to write longer songs at that time, so it's just more of like it's more of a rock and roll record than you think it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even though it's psychedelic, where the Beatles took it a step further. I don't
Oh
think the
yeah.
Stones. I don't think the Stones really. They weren't going to do something like A Day in the Life. They
No.
weren't going to do something like that. Just a big epic kind of. They're not. They're not about that. Okay. You're
No.
lucky these guys can all be in the same room at the same time. Okay, to record this record. And actually, to be honest with you, that didn't happen a whole lot when they were recording this. And the reason is because they all had not all of them, but Keith and Mick and Brian, okay, were all having problems with the law. Okay, they all had various drug busts that had gone on. Keith and Mick had done a little time, just a couple of days. Okay, but they had these legal problems, so they were very very seldomly present all together at the same time when they recorded this, and that kind of made the album longer to record, and also it's a little disjointed. Okay, it's kind of like pieced together in a way.
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. What they do, like Mick came one day, did the vocal, and the other guys came, did the guitar, then the bass, and then the drum.
Yeah, they would lay down the track. Somebody would come later, do something else, drum track, bass track, whatever,
and then they mix it all to make the sound, I guess.
Right. And they did it themselves, and I don't think they had a whole lot of expertise at it. It's not a badly produced album, I don't think. I think it sounds pretty good, and the remasters of it are fantastic that have come out over the years.
Yeah, of course, it will be better.
Yeah. Now, the problem also they had with this, like again, bringing up Bill Wyman, how he kind of was the adult in the room in a way. He wasn't really getting high on acid and stuff like that at this time. He would get a little upset when they recorded this because all the band members would show up with like 10 people. Okay, so yeah, you had like this fucking entourage come in, okay, and with a dozen people, it's very distracting. The song "In Another Land," which Bill Wyman actually sings, it's the only time he ever sang on a Stones song. Okay, and you wouldn't even know it's him because there's so much effect on his voice, psychedelic effect. But it is Bill Wyman singing that song, and it was released. It was released as a single, which I always thought was very ballsy of the Stones at that time to put that out as a single with Wyman sing. I always liked that. He actually wrote that song. Okay, it was written as kind of a parody of what was going on at the time. Like I think he thought he wanted to be in another land or something like that because it was just chaos. Okay, in the studio. Now, what would happen is these guys would be getting high, and really like by the time the album was completed, there was still a lot more work to do on it.
Yeah.
Okay, because it was done so disjointedly. Even Brian Jones was asked like about a month or two before it came out, like, "What do you got?" And he's like, hey, "We got nothing." It's just all over the place. So, that's what happens when you spend 15 hours a day tripping your mind out. It's hard to make an album. So,
yeah.
One thing about this album that's really interesting is they were experimenting with many new instruments and sound effects as well. There was something called a mellotron, which is kind of like it's a keyboard, okay, but there's a tape mechanism inside. I don't know too much about it. You hear it on a lot of 60s records, especially psychedelic sounding stuff. And it's just a very unique kind of instrument, and they played that. They used it a lot on that record. They also used a theremin, which is another very interesting instrument. It's done using magnet and air, and you play it with your hands, and you get that sound. And you hear it a lot in like old 30s and 40s horror movies. That like woo kind of sound.
Yeah.
That's a theremin. Okay, and they use that on the album too. Now, also, they were using effects like shortwave radio sounds on the album. String arrangements were done, and they were done by future Led Zeppelin bass player John Paul Jones.
Whoa.
Okay, so he was involved with the making of this album. Mick Jagger. Now, Mick Jagger hates this album. Okay. Keith Richards is not too fond of it either, but Jagger has called the album rubbish. He called it kind of like an organized chaos. A lot of the album tracks had been kind of reworked and retitled right up to the end when they were ready to put out the album. for instance, like the song "In Another Land"
Yeah.
was actually originally titled "Acid in the Grass."
Acid in the Grass.
Right. 2000 Man, which is one of the best songs on the album, was
Yeah, it's a
called
great song.
I Want People to Know.
I want
Okay.
people to know.
Right. She's a Rainbow, which is probably the
Yeah.
biggest hit off the album. That was originally titled Flowers in Your Bonnet.
Wow. You know
Okay.
what's
So they,
funny? She's a Rainbow is in a car commercial now, I think, right? Something
uh
like
huh.
that. It's a weird car commercial.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a song that, and I've followed the Stones all my life. I mean, it was a song that you never heard too much. Okay. They didn't play a lot off this album on the radio over the years, classic rock stations. But now you hear She's a Rainbow more now in
You know
things
who
than
used
you
to
ever
love
did.
that? You know who loved that song? You know Lucy from the bar Lucy? She plays that
Oh,
song all the time.
really? Really?
If you ever go
I
there,
must have.
she will go.
She
She'll
always
play
plays it. I must have. I must have just not realized that she loved it so much.
one of her favorite songs. You play that, she'll go, "Oh, thank you, thank you."
Wow. Well, I hope she opens up soon. They've been closed through this whole thing.
Yeah,
You know. But now, the original versions of the tracks have been bootlegged for years, okay, with these original titles. There was a lot of early demos and reworkings that made it out into the bootleg world, okay? And they can be heard on various collections that are out there. In 1998, there was an 8 CD bootleg box set of all these outtakes, and it was released. You can see the development kind of and the changes of the songs when you listen to this. I've heard some of this stuff, and you can see how the songs all developed. They start out different, but they work their way to what you know.
yeah,
And there was a store. I don't know if you remember. It's not there anymore. Subterranean Records on
yeah,
6th Avenue near the old Waverly Theater.
yeah. There was a bunch of record stores in that
Yeah,
area.
there was a store behind there on Cornelia Street, the street that runs behind there, and there was a
Yeah,
record store you walk down into. That guy in there, I can't remember his name. Greg, maybe Dave. I can't remember his name, but I used to go in there a lot, and he had the best collection of Stones bootlegs that I ever saw.
wow.
Okay, and I remember one day in there talking with him. I spent like 2 hours in there just listening to stuff from this, and we were both like, "Wow, it's like crazy stuff." Um, and it's interesting. So if you get your hands on that stuff, check it out.
Yeah, because this
Now,
album is pretty much about 43 minutes, almost 44 minutes long, and all the song it run. You know what? It's weird. It almost runs like a punk album because it's very quick music. That
yeah,
and it goes in a smooth transition. I really like just like the way from the first song to the end. So it's just, I think the way they picked the song was pretty. You know, each song gave each other song a credit, but it was a nice flow. It was. I think they did a good
yeah,
job in the way they listed the songs.
yeah. I mean, well, anytime, especially back in the day when you had vinyl, okay, you had to figure out the uh, the song order, the selection, okay, because if you did it wrong, like you say, it wouldn't flow right. And then there was things that you would want on side A as opposed to side B. Like remember when we were doing Raw Power last week, the record company demanded that the Stooges do two slow songs, one on side A, one on side B.
Yeah, I
You
found that
know,
so weird.
well, the point of what I'm saying is when you had that format of the LP, okay, people used to really take a lot of time into the order of things. And I think that's kind of lost a little bit with CDs, though I guess they could still consider the order. But how many times you listen to CD on shuffle? You know what I
Not too
mean?
many times.
Well, I used to,
Yeah,
listen to it on shuffle, and sometimes you don't take it into consideration the order of the record. But
yeah,
definitely with something like this, which was psychedelic. They were trying to say something. I'm not sure what, but they were trying to say something with this album, I guess. The actual working title of the album was not their Satanic Majesties Request. It was Cosmic Christmas.
Cosmic. That's a hard title.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't call it that. But
Cosmic
do you know
Christmas.
how they got the name?
No, how the name?
Okay.
Because they
On
got a
a
hidden truck. They got a hidden track called Cosmic Christmas, isn't it?
It's not a hidden track. It was on the original bootlegs and stuff. There's something
Yeah.
where you could hear. I think it's Bill Wyman saying like, "We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a
Yeah.
Cosmic
It
Christmas." Something.
starts like at
But
7.
that,
It starts like at 7:58. We wish you a Cosmic Christmas.
yeah. But the idea of calling it their Satanic Majesty's Request comes from what's on a British passport. Well, if you look at a British passport, it says Her Britannic Majesty Request.
Ooh, I never knew that.
Okay, so they changed it to their Satanic Majesty's Request. Okay,
Funny.
yeah. Now the album cover is iconic. Okay, and it
Yeah.
went through some different ideas. Okay, originally they were thinking of having Mick Jagger nailed to a cross. Okay, and the record label said, "No, you're not doing that." Okay, and that's a little bit in bad taste, you know.
Yeah, that's
So
not good.
the record company rejected that, and then they all agreed on the Michael Cooper photograph. Michael Cooper is the guy who did the photo for Sergeant Pepper. Um, Pepper had, if you look at the album cover for Pepper, it had a picture of a Shirley Temple doll, and the doll is wearing a shirt that says "Welcome, Rolling Stones." Okay, so what they did is they actually, if you look at the picture of Satanic Majesty's Request, there's actually a picture of all 4 Beatles on that album. You got to look for it, but it's on the cover in that whole thing. That was just kind of as a response to, what they did with the Stones on their album cover. Now, originally the album came out with the photo in 3D. Okay, now a lot of re-releases since then they don't include that, so you
No.
might not have ever seen that before. But when it came out originally in '67, that photograph was like in the middle of the album cover. It wasn't. They wanted it to be the whole album cover, but the 3D technology was expensive to make that kind of thing, so they
Yeah.
kept it smaller, and they have that blue and white border around it that's kind of thick. Okay, so you have that image was in 3D. Okay, but it was just small in the center. Okay, now, like I said earlier, when the album was released in December of '67, it got to number 3 in the UK and to number 2 in the US, which is great. But then it just dropped. It just dropped off the map. I mean, I think in those days, if the Stones had put out a blank record, it would have went to number 1. Okay, for 1 week. Okay, and that's how it was with this album. It kind of just dropped out of sight, and then they went into a totally different direction less than a year later.
Yeah, but they
Because
came out with Beggar's Banquet, right? That was the
yeah,
next
Beggar's
one.
Banquet came out in '68. This came out the end of '67, so
Yeah,
they were
so
already. Yeah, I mean they put out a compilation. I believe, if I remember right, I think Flowers, that compilation had come out in between. They just put out something, to hold people off. But Beggar's Banquet's a totally different album. That was, to me, the beginning of really what the Stones would have become. That album.
yeah,
But 2 singles were released from this album: "In Another Land" and
yep,
"She's a Rainbow." Okay,
yep,
"In Another Land" got to number 87 on Billboard, and "She's a Rainbow" got to number 25. So it was a modest hit. Okay, on an album that made it to number 2. I mean, it really, you can't call it a bomb. Okay, but it just dropped off the map, kind of quick. That was the problem.
Mike, let me
Um,
ask you a question. I think anything the Rolling Stone would have taken out would have gone top 20 within a week and maybe drop off, but it would have gone to the top.
yeah, without a doubt.
You know?
They were so popular at that point, and they were kind of like in '67. They really weren't touring much. Okay, the last time they had been to the States was in '66, and they wouldn't come back to the States again until '69. So this was a period where there was a lot going on. They had legal problems. Okay, they had Brian Jones problems. Okay, uh, Brian Jones would pass away in this period. Okay, by '69,
Yeah.
he would pass away. Um, there's an interesting documentary. I sent it to you. Did you watch it? The one under
No,
review?
I didn't get, but I got it down as one of the things that I need to watch.
Yeah, it's under review '67 through '69,
Yeah, I saw
and
that those years.
yeah, it's interesting because one of the narrators brings up a point how this period is kind of like the Stones' second wave. Okay, their first wave was earlier,
Yeah,
63, 64, 65, 66. But then now they have kind of an experimental pop phase on Between the Buttons, which
yeah,
is I was thinking about doing a making of Between the Buttons instead of this.
yeah.
Okay,
Between the
but
Buttons would have been great. That's a good album too.
it's a great album, and it's also another album that some people really love and some people really hate. Mick Jagger does not like anything off Between the Buttons. They don't
Wow,
do anything off that album.
wow.
Occasionally they'll do the song Connection, which is a
Yeah,
Keith Richards. Keith Richards sings it. I've seen them do that live. Okay? But I think that's because it's a Richards song. But everything else on there, they don't really do. And there's some great tracks on that album. But that was a brief period with that kind of a pop, British pop kind of thing. Then they went into the psychedelic, and then they would go into the blues. So a lot of changes through that 67 through 69 period. Now, Keith Richards himself has always been critical of Satanic Majesty's Request. He really only likes She's a Rainbow and 2,000 Light Years from Home.
yeah. That's a good
Okay?
song too.
Yeah, I mean, he's on the record saying the rest of the album is a load of crap. Okay. I don't agree with you there, Keith, but okay. But hey, sometimes somebody's crap is somebody else's masterpiece.
I think this is
But
an album they did to just fill in. We need to take an album. We got a deal. Let's take out this album, and they said let's play with it. And then when they took out Baker's Banquet, I think that's a great album. I think that's what turned out to be the Rolling Stones after a while of years.
yeah, they all came together. You know that stretch from Beggar's Banquet all the way to like Goat's Head Soup into the
Yeah,
early '70s. I mean, there's not a bad song. There's not a
it's
bad
rock,
album.
and it's rock and roll. It's all rock
Oh,
and roll.
totally. And they had so many influences, blues, country, so many different things going into their music, and they just spit it out into this new form of rock and roll. I mean, like that's amazing. But you look at this little cosmic Christmas, okay, the cosmic
Yeah,
Christmas of this album, Satanic Majesty's Request. It to me, it's a masterpiece. It is. All right, in its own way. Okay, is it as good as things they did before or after? No, but the fact that they went this direction, they had the balls to do it. Okay,
yeah,
and actually, it wasn't. They weren't meant to be a psychedelic band.
no.
Okay, but they gave it a shot, and it was of that time. So
I also
when you
think
listen
they
to
did
it,
it. Yeah, they did it to be like, you know what? Let's do something different. We've been doing this for a while. Let's try something else. If it fails, it fails. If it does good, all right, we did it, and that's it. They didn't care. It's like they just went in there. Let's put something down. Let's do
yeah.
something.
Now I got to be part of a little bit of Stone's history with this album
Uh oh.
because I was there on the Steel Wheels tour, okay, in '89 when they did all the shows at Shea Stadium. It was like 5 nights in a row, or almost in a row.
Crazy out there, right? Was it crazy?
Yeah, remember the band Living Color?
Yeah.
They opened up, okay,
Oh my god.
and yeah, and they were good. And I went to see the Stones. It was the first time I had ever seen them, and they were bringing out 2,000 Light Years from Home live for the first time ever.
Wow.
They had never performed it live except on that tour. It was the first time they ever brought it out. Um, they'd had like this cool light show in the stadium with it, and I remember Jagger saying, "Well, we're gonna give this a shot. We have never done this before, And I couldn't believe it. It sounded just like the fucking album. They did it like
That got to be
just like
hard.
it is. Well, I mean, I saw uh, McCartney live in 2011 at Yankee Stadium, and when he did the tracks from Sergeant Pepper, it blew my mind because it's
Wow.
so hard to produce that live.
Yeah.
But he did it. I mean, I don't know how. Okay, I mean, I felt like I was listening to the album. Now, he obviously John Lennon is no longer with us, and when McCartney sang "A Day in the Life," which John used to sing, okay, it sounded. Other than that, it sounded like the fucking album. It
Wow.
just did. At Yankee Stadium with a big crowd like that, that was amazing. But again, 2,000 Light Years from Home was a track that you never even really heard on the radio. You had to be like a big Stones fan to know it. Okay,
Yeah.
not a casual Stones fan wouldn't know that song at that time. And
Yeah.
they brought it out. They had a cool light show. They've also done "She's a Rainbow" a little bit here and there over the years, but that was only in the last like maybe 20, 30 years. From the '60s to the '80s, they didn't touch that album. They just dropped
Wow.
it. They didn't do. They never did it live. You know. Now, since
But
the late set, what's that, Rob?
they also had a lot of help. They had a lot of many other musicians on this album. People don't know that also, but they had many different other musicians. They even had backup singers. Like they did. This was like a big fucking production, believe it or not.
Yeah. I'm not. I can't say I know who is on that album entirely. There's not a lot of credit given on that.
No,
Um, with the Stones, it could be anybody would pop into the studio.
yeah,
Okay,
that's what
they
it was.
probably,
Yeah,
yeah. I would think that maybe Marianne Faithfull did some backup because she was still with Jagger at that point. Uh, Not sure. That's a good question. I'd never seen who helped on that album. We know John Paul Jones did some of the string arrangements.
yeah,
Okay, and at that time he was a sessions musician too.
yeah.
Okay, so was
A guy
Page.
called
That
Ronnie Lane.
was
Ronnie
that
Lane.
Ronnie Lane plays on that album.
Yeah, he's a backup singer.
Backup singer. Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
and
yeah. I mean, I'm sure.
Steve
Look,
Marriott. Steve Marriott was a backup singer in it too.
okay. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah. I mean, this was a time when they would bring it. Well, they were bringing their big entourages into the studio. Maybe Marriott was hanging out.
yeah, that's what
Okay,
it
and
makes sense.
Ronnie
Steve
Lane
Marriott,
was,
man, he was
yeah,
hanging out.
probably hanging out, getting high, whatever. And that's. Let me throw a little backing vocal on the album. You don't have to pay me. I'll just be on it.
I'll just be
It's good.
honest. Yeah,
Yeah. Now, since the late '70s, there's been like a major critical reassessment about this album. When it came out, it was nobody really knew what to make of it. Some gave it bad reviews, some gave it lukewarm reviews. A few people gave it good reviews, but it just was very mixed. But since the '70s, it's kind of been reassessed that, even though the psychedelic sound wasn't for the Stones and it wasn't what they were about, they were still great songs. Okay. And in the '70s, you had Kiss covered 2000 Man for the Dynasty album that came out in '79. Ace Frehley sang that song.
wow.
Okay, they do a great version of it, great heavier, because it's kind of an acoustic, softer kind of song, and he does it very heavy. But that was for the Dynasty album in '79. I'm sure you Kiss fans know, and they actually brought it back on the Kiss Unplugged album in '96. They did it. They did it unplugged as well. Um, Satanic Majesties Request. It's been released and re-released many times over the years. Probably the 50th anniversary in 2017 is the best collection to get. It's still kind of on my bucket list. I don't have it yet. It's a little pricey, but I'm working on it.
How much would it
It's
cost? What's about the cost? How much does it cost right now? About a few
I
hundred?
think it's about 200, give or take. Yeah. Okay. It's a vinyl and CD collection. Okay,
Wow.
and what they did with it is they two vinyl uh, records. One is a remastered version of the album, and then they have a mono version of it. Okay, which
Oh,
I thought was interesting because I'm pretty sure it was never released in mono in the first place.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think it never. I'm pretty sure. If there's anyone out who wants to correct me, I'll be happy to be corrected. I think that album and then the albums after that were never released in mono. The stuff earlier was, and
Right.
there's a big scene with that. Like the Beatles put out all their early stuff on mono, and some people swear that's the way to listen to the Beatles in mono. Okay, this album, I think, they didn't have a mono. Um, they didn't remaster the mono. Okay, from an original mono tracks. Okay, I think it was something that was created for this 50th anniversary disc. If I'm wrong, anybody be happy to correct me. I'm pretty sure that's what it was because there's a following people. There's people out there that really love the mono stuff. I'm kind of
Have you
like
heard it? Have you heard that version of the mono version?
of Satanic Majesty's Request. Yeah,
I haven't heard. I gotta look that up.
yeah. It's cool. It's cool. It's you know what's cool in mono, if you're into that. The Beach Boys album, Pet Sounds.
Okay.
Okay, and that's one we're gonna do a show on one day, because Brian Wilson was out of his fucking mind when he made that album. But
We haven't even done the Beach Boys yet. That's
no,
one
we
of the
haven't.
bands we haven't
We
even
should.
touched.
We should go there. They're a very important band.
We talked about the Beach Boy and the Charles Manson.
Yeah, but it's very interesting. They released the Ramones' first album, debut album in mono. I have that,
Oh,
and I have it side by side with the remastered stereo version.
yeah,
And mono was something that the Ramones always wanted to do. They wanted to do a mono and a stereo version, but
yeah.
the record company would never give them the money to do it.
Nah,
You know,
just do
no,
one version.
because yeah, exactly. And by the time the Stones did that Satanic Majesty's Request album, the the idea of having a mono and a stereo album was starting to go away. They were just
Yeah.
making stereo at that point. So that's all I got for you today, Mr. Rossi. Satanic
Very good,
Majesty's
man.
Request. Mm-hmm.
Very good today, man. So far, it continues, man. Last week we had Raw Power, right? That was the first
Right?
time we started. Then we had the first. Then we had Motorhead, which holy shit. And then we move on. We got two more albums for this month of the making of. The next one is the New York Dolls, and you're like a New York Doll historian almost. So that should be a good show.
Yeah. And I just want to mention too that I don't know if anybody's noticed the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee list,
Yes.
and they're hopefully going to get in. Okay, they were voted in. They were voted to try to get in back in I think 2000 or 2001, and they didn't make it. And so now it's the second time around, 20 years later, and I got a feeling they're going to get in this time. Sylvain just passed.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, David Joe is the only one left. I'm curious to see what he would say. I kind of I don't want to shit on anybody just yet. I don't know what he's going to say if they got in, if they get in. But let's hope they get in. They
You
deserve
know
it.
who else is going in, right? You saw who else is on there. We just did a show on them.
Uh,
Iron Maiden.
Oh yeah, yeah. Iron Maiden is they're actually getting in, right?
They're getting in, yeah.
They're in. They're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Dolls are part of that group that I think has to be voted in by fans or something. I'm not sure how that works.
If you can find something leaked to vote it in by fan, you should put it up and we can spread it out.
I'll find out how that works. I'll let you know.
Because that wouldn't be bad.
Yeah, and then the last week we have is the debut album by REM called Murmur. We're going to talk about the making of that. And April and May we got some great shows too. We're going to do a show about DJ John Peel. We're doing a show about the Jesus and Mary chain.
Oh, that's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So, okay, Mr. Rossi, if anybody's looking for me, you can find me on Facebook under Michael Baker. Also on Facebook, the Rockshow podcast group page that me and you run. Also, I am on Instagram, RockerMike212. I'm on MeWe under RockerMike, and I'm on Clout Hub under RockerMike. Parler is gone, and I was knocked off of Twitter. But if I'm back by the time this is on, it's RockerMike3 on Twitter. I just can't post nothing yet right now.
And you're on Instagram also.
RockerMike212.
Yeah. Another thing. I think I might have to get to SoundCloud. You got to sign up for it. How you do that?
Clout Hub. It's called Clout Hub.
Club Hub.
Cloud Hub.
What's that? Like another record thing or another? What is it? It's like a website. What is it?
Cloud Hub is another. It's just another social media site. It's kind of like Twitter and Facebook, kind of mixed together.
Oh, I didn't know that. All right, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's just another one of these sites that people have been going to because of all the censorship and everything.
Okay. Not bad. So, and if you guys want to find me, you can look me up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Anything getting lumped up, we also got the fucking website we got. Another thing that we have are the T-shirts. Sponsor the show by getting a T-shirt and so on and so on. You people know the stick. And from us to you, thank you for all the support so far. We were 101 in Great Britain, the top podcast. And we're just working our way, getting the numbers up, trying to get good shows. A lot of stuff is coming in for 2021. You're going to see the whole empire start growing a little bigger. Like, in order to get an empire, you start it very small. You take over land after land after land until you have a freaking kingdom.
One lumped up nation at a time.
One lumped up nation at a time. And I also like to say, guys, the national anthem is back on Channel 11 every day at 3:58 if you're up. Channel 11. They have great different version of the national anthem every day. It's about 1minute and 58 seconds. And if you're up, you're going to take a pee, turn on your TV. The CW has the national anthem so far every day. I've been pretty impressed. I've been waking up and catching it so far every time because I'm like, I'm a lunatic. I don't really sleep.
That's true. You never sleep. I'm always texting you in the middle of the night.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to see the national anthem being
That's like
played
the old days. That's like the old days. I like that.
Yeah, that you know, when last time you even seen that? I didn't think anybody played the national anthem. They used to play before they went
every
out,
night.
And there was no broadcast. Remember that they used to shut.
It would just shut off. You get snow. Yeah.
No snow for the next couple of hours. Snow. Like, remember how those days the TV would stop.
Yeah, there were only a couple of channels.
And then by 6 o'clock, boom, they come back on.
Yeah, pop one. Watch a little Banana Splits or something on Channel 5.
Yeah.
All right, Rob. So what do we always say?
Don't get drunk.
Get lumped up.
See you next week, guys.
Take care, people.